Unmute. Sorry, that was me. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. Welcome to the Earning Curve. As most of you know, if you're regulars, attendees to the Earning Curve, this is a newer platform and webinar, so we count on all of you as the audience members to send us the questions. So we let you drive the panel. My name is Mary Ann Biangardi, and I'm the head of business development at Schmershel Treloar & Company. Today's topic is how to hire the right sales team. So our experts will share their perspectives on hiring the right sales team that will help inevitably help all of you find the best fit for your organization. We will discuss how to recruit, train, and retain the best salespeople for your team. Since all of you drive the panel, start sending us your questions via chat. So there's a thought bubble icon at the bottom of the screen. Just open that up and send us your questions and I will get them answered for you. We have a great panel today, and I do want to make an announcement that Sarah Tucker is unable to join us due to an emergency, and everything's okay, but she can't be with us today. So we've still got 4 excellent panelists. Kim Baker is our anchor panelist. Kim is with Vivid Performance Group. She's an award-winning sales representative, manager, and sales leader. She has over 25 years of sales experience in manufacturing, medical diagnostics, IT, and professional services. Next, we have Kristie Jones from the Sales Acceleration Group. Kristie has 19 plus years as a sales leader, helping founders increase revenue through improved strategy, process, and people. Jaime Nunnelee is next with Nsr Talent. Jaime is the president of Nsr Talent, a St. Louis-based search firm specializing in hiring top sales, HR, and recruiting professionals. She has over 15 years of experience in helping St. Louis business leaders in the area, from onboarding, negotiation, retention of hiring sales teams. So she'll be a great addition to this conversation. Douglas Hall. Doug is with D Advocate and Associates. Doug has a vast knowledge and years of experience in successfully managing talent teams and companies. He's a business owner, so obviously he hires a lot of people. Doug founded D Advocate and Associates to help both individuals and teams realize exponential growth by helping them focus on the technical and uniquely human aspects of business development. So welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the panelists. Before we open it up to all of your questions, I want to ask Kim Baker a question to get things started. And after she responds, then all the other panelists or the experts can add comments if they wish as well. So Kim, how has hiring changed during COVID?
Yeah, well, it's changed in a lot of ways that my fellow panelists can speak to within their area. I would say within the area of assessments, we've seen more and more companies interested in now using assessments for hiring because they're not doing that in-person, face-to-face interview. So where folks maybe thought they were a bit more of a people whisperer because they were physically located with somebody, which was not really accurate, but they may have felt that. Now they're relying more and more on assessments. We're also seeing interest in different types of assessments, of course, personality to predict somebody's performance, but we see a lot more too in the areas of reasoning and judgment for some roles.
Great, thanks, Kim. Does anybody else want to add to that?
I mean, yeah, I can speak to the recruiting piece of how things have changed for certain. A lot of companies are hiring 2 years worth of sales professionals in 1 year. So it's become a candidate driven market and it's hard to find really good talent. A lot of companies are looking for people with experience in their niche because they don't have the bandwidth or the resources to train like they did before. They're really wanting to somebody that can hit the ground running. So that's a bit different as well. It's busy. People are hiring. The job market is good. So you're on mute.
Thank you. I agree with what Jaime said. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely very hot market right now. I've spent most of the year hiring sales reps for various clients across the country. and sales leaders and SDRs. One of the things we're finding are a couple of things. One, a lot of my clients who were in the past only looking for candidates within their own geographic region now don't care anymore. So we've opened up the world, right? So now I'm getting candidates from all across the United States. If everybody's going to work remotely anyway, it doesn't necessarily matter where they're at, which has posed an interesting situation about compensation, right? So again, if I've got clients here in the Midwest and candidates on the coast, sometimes our compensation budget and what the candidate's looking for don't match. So it started an interesting debate. I was just telling the panelists before we jumped on that I offered a job to a candidate over the weekend who was looking for $10,000 more than the base salary I offered. He was out of Long Beach, California. And I said, I understand you've got a cost of living issue, but I have the luxury of being able to hire from anywhere and fit my budget. And so, it's interesting because like Jamie said, like it felt like it's kind of been a candidate's market, but I kind of flipped the script over the weekend and it felt good where, I can get quality candidates in the middle of the country, for a price that fits my client's budget. And so I think it'll be interesting to see, I had the same problem with that candidate earlier in the year out of New York. So I think it'll be interesting to see how maybe, salary expectations or total compensation expectations may level a little bit as people realize that, yes, maybe in the past, we've gone to the coast to get specialist or specialized type of individuals and we're willing to pay more, if you lived in that area, but now we have the luxury of being able to take candidates from anywhere, and totally opening up our candidate pool.
I think an interesting thing that candidates don't really understand, in some states, it's just really onerous for an employer to do business. So if I don't have to, why would I hire somebody in California? I can't do non-competes. There are all kinds of other things if I employ somebody in California, regardless of where my company is headquartered, and some of the other states too, that quite frankly make a candidate less attractive. Colorado's got some things going on now with that. Christy, can you speak to that? Because I bet a lot of our attendees don't know what's going on in Colorado that can make candidates in that state much, much less attractive.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually have a client out of Tel Aviv who had hired 2 sales reps in Denver. She actually had gone to school in Boulder. And we were talking about hiring a 3rd candidate. And I said, are we going back to Denver? And she goes, She goes, not anymore. She said, it doesn't advantage the employer anymore with all of the new laws that are going on. And she said, I'm just scared that we're going to make a mistake even during the interview process and asking about compensation. So, back in the day, I used to say like, hey, what are you making? Right. And now I say, tell me about your compensation structure. Right. And so she's just, she said, it's just too risky. And she said, I'm not sure I fully even understand all the laws going on in Colorado. And so she said, how about Pittsburgh? I go, sure. Pennsylvania sounds great. Let's do it. And I have another client who actually has an office in Denver, and we're looking to hire in Kansas as a result of that. They want them close enough, but not in the state of Colorado. So I think that's, Kim, super interesting because as Colorado laws started to change and we had 2 employees there already and we're going back for our 3rd, she goes, not touching that state with a 10-foot pole right now.
Yeah. The state of Colorado does not realize with that legislation that they made their, employees,
their residents less attractive.
Yeah, they did it to actually protect employees, and
Right.
they've done the opposite.
That's right.
And COVID has really, really accelerated this. I mean, we've been talking about talent mobility for years now, but it's just supercharged it.
And we're, again, like, coming from someone who, is in the tech world and living in that space and worked for a company out of Silicon Valley, we're all about, diversity and equity, right? But like you said, some of these states are making it very challenging. And, and again, like my client was just scared that somebody would make a mistake and say something wrong and they would be sued. And so, we all want diversity and inclusivity within our, within our culture, within our companies. But, when you make it scary that you're afraid if one wrong question during an interview is going to cost you money financially, from a fine or from a lawsuit, it just, like you said, they were trying to protect the employees of Colorado, but they've done the opposite.
anybody's accusing anybody of being like biased against Colorado. So I think diversity and inclusion is still going to be covered, even if you cut a couple of states out of the mix. And
Oh, yeah.
Pennsylvania could use some love right now. So I say shop there for sure.
No.
I just wanted to add though, Kim was spot on. COVID was the accelerant. It was an accelerant for everything, how we hire, how we drive culture, how we run our organizations. It globalized everything. So now these candidates, they're not just looking for a job, they're looking for the right job for their job. So it's a big piece of this too, whether what state they're in, whether they're coming in globally, does this company offer me something that I can sell, believe, and be a part of? And I don't think that was something that a lot of sellers questioned as much before as they do now. The shift of how people see their lives after COVID and how they live their lives is very different.
Yeah, I'd like to add on the companies need to start changing. There's a lot of companies that don't want remote workers, or that now that the vaccine's available, want people to come back in the office again, and employees that aren't comfortable with it. There's a lot of companies that just aren't adjusting the way that they need to. They're not adjusting the salaries, they're not adjusting everything. And so they're missing out on top talent, to your point, Doug, is people have options now and they want to go somewhere that values what they value. So a lot of companies are being left behind from that perspective.
You know, I'm curious what the Jamie and Kristie, I think you probably see this more than I do, Doug, maybe you as well. You know, so much of selling is happening remotely. You know, I have still a background and a connection to medical device and pharma, and folks, you know, reps couldn't get in the hospitals, you couldn't get in the office building. And there had been a push to separate industry and physician in the medical community anyway, and limit access. But again, COVID accelerated it. Do you find that hiring managers and organizations think they should pay less for a rep because remote selling is easier? Do they realize it's actually harder to get to that individual? You pay more? Is inflation pushing up? What do y'all see happening?
I'm seeing companies have to pay more because I'm not seeing anybody pay anything less. No, Kristie.
Yeah, and we're paying more, not because I mean, again, like I agree with you, Kim, the job is harder now, for sure. And so, but we're paying more because here's what here's the cycle I saw when, the shutdown first happened. A lot of A players lost their jobs for no fault of their own, right? And so we flooded the market with really great candidates who PS were willing to take a little bit less, right? Because like one day they had a job and the next day they didn't, and they weren't prepared for that. And so then, so the companies that had money, I mean, I reached out to all of my clients and said, hey, if you got budget and you're sitting on money, there are A players out there that we can get at bargain basement prices right now. And so we did. But then 6 to 8 months later, all of a sudden, things started to open up, and all of these companies who had been on a hiring freeze unfroze their wallet. And now all of a sudden we have all of these people looking to hire, but the A players that lost their jobs initially aren't going anywhere right now. Right. So they're just 12 to 18 months into their new job. They're happy. They're remote. They've got all the tools at home. And so right now, the shortage I'm seeing is of A players. So, there's not a shortage of jobs if you're a sales rep right now or a sales leader. But what I'm finding is a lot of those A players that lost their job during the pandemic found jobs, right? A players found jobs. That wasn't a problem. It took them a little bit longer than it might have taken them, and they may have taken a little bit less money, but they found good homes with good companies. And so now we've got an A player shortage.
I agree with that.
I think we need to also, pay a little attention to that the skill sets that are required of sellers have shifted a lot. So somebody that might have been a top seller pre-COVID now doesn't have the skill sets they need to either sell virtually or deal with this new kind of system that they're working with. If you were just a handshake, cold call, and show up and close the deal kind of person, you've got to reacclimate yourself to tools and figure out new ways to sell. So we've also got this shift in performance that has happened that didn't happen before, where suddenly somebody that could sell now is completely lost in this, new world. So it's really interesting watching certain sellers start to get better because of that, and those that are kind of hanging back because they're waiting for the good old days.
Doug, I'm curious, what are the biggest, what's the greatest skill set need that you're seeing that's shifted? What skills now do these reps need to be stronger in that maybe they didn't need before COVID?
I'm going to get real esoteric on this one, but I think what it really does is expose their human skills. Their, going virtual, you have to be more personable, more intimate. You have to be able to connect with someone on a different level than if you're just showing up and doing the sales dance. Caring. I mean, I can give you the simple answers, knowing how to use your camera and your microphone and setting up your tech. But the reality is, I really feel that this new scenario has challenged mediocre sellers to really improve who they are, because it's not as easy for them. So I think those soft skills, and I hate calling them soft skills, but listening is huge. And I know I didn't listen to the question you asked me right before we started the webinar, but listening is huge. It's even more important now, although now we get to record, but it's even more important now because you've got all these other distractions going on. Somebody's in their home, you're trying to sell, there's dogs, there's this, there's that. It's not as easy as when you took a lunch meeting.
Yeah, that listening
Go
to
ahead.
understand, and let's face it, we've all trained, worked with, had salespeople who listened to respond, not listen to understand. And it's even more critical now with the virtual, because it's, depending upon the sales environment you're in, it's easier for people to run and hide. I mean, it feels to me a little bit more like the marketing world, where you're sending out email, or you're doing, LinkedIn or whatever you're doing to try to get that attention to, even develop a lead. And now it's even more, getting the prospect to even respond. And I know we run into situations where, we have salespeople who want to get out and sell, but the person they're selling to literally is still working from home, even though the rep wants to get out and sell, or maybe in the office, but they're limited to be able to visit.
One of the bonuses I found though is I'm getting, even me personally with my prospects, I'm getting more people to come to the party, right? Because when I was going on site, I was to some extent stuck with who I had on site, right? And so now when I'm doing discovery calls with folks, I'm getting the marketing person joining the call, because they can, even if they're in a different city. And I'm getting, like last week I had a channel partner join a discovery call unexpectedly, and I was like, that's awesome. So I think, one of the benefits is if you're mastering all the things that Doug has talked about, and again, the listening skills and all of the, Zoomification of selling, like I'm all of a sudden touching more people, which means I also have more people, if somebody starts to ghost, I got more people to go back to and touch and readdress. But I also have more problems, right? For every different department that shows up, or every different person, I've got different pain points that need to be addressed. So the problem gets bigger as more people join. So I think that's one of, I do have, I have an MSP client, a managed service provider client right now, that is a real struggle, right? Because they need somebody in that city, because that's the city that they support. They need somebody who's going to be willing to go into, a small, mid-sized office to talk about the IT infrastructure needs. And, I had a prospect, again, a couple of weeks ago, reach out, had been referred to me, because I have done some work with managed service providers, and they're like, we can't find anyone. And I said, if I had magic fairy dust for you, I would sprinkle all of us. But I said, no offense, but you're in a really big disadvantage right now, because people don't have to take an in-office job anymore if they don't want to. And so, you feel sorry for those people who really, it's a territory job. It does require touching people. I've got another healthcare company out of Atlanta who's in a little bit of the same position. And so, to Jamie's point, some of these companies who can have remote workers do need to come to the party, but in some cases, the business model doesn't allow for that. And those kind of, that kind of sale has been happening in person. A tech comes on site to fix, the broken copier or whatever. And so, I do feel for those people as they're reaching out to me. And I said, hey, if I find the magic bullet, or if I find the fairy dust, I'll let you know. But, you're going to have to wait this out.
Restructure your model, because that's the other thing is businesses just have to reinvent themselves. It can't just be a one job fits all. And the reality is I'm no stranger to loving tech. Everybody knows my opinion on that stuff, but you can be way more efficient. And frankly, I'd rather have all the decision makers on the call, so I don't have to worry about getting a call back saying somebody else poo-pooed on your idea. Bring them in the room, get them on the call. I can do 8 calls in the time it takes me to see one client physically. But the reality of it is that that intimacy you build with somebody virtually, then when you get to meet them in person, so much stronger. I have clients that I worked with for a year that I never met in person. And when I did meet them, it was like reuniting with family. So I don't buy into the whole, this isn't as personable as the old way. Reality is it's way more personal. And if you're good at it, you can close a whole hell of a lot more.
So Marianne, I think we've got some questions in chat. Are there any you want to run by?
Yes, I didn't want to interrupt this great conversation.
That's okay. Yeah, we want to make sure that we're taking care of our participants and answering their questions.
Yes, for sure. So we've got one here. How do you consider and evaluate total sales performance?
Christy, Doug, you guys want to take that?
Yeah, lots of KPIs here, right? Again, at the end of the day, I say sales is an objective sport, thank God, right? So there's very little subjectivity to it. There's a quota, there are measurable metrics that are associated with that. So, I measure obviously quota. I also measure, pipeline, right? Do you need 4x or 5x your pipeline? Is your pipeline going to help you reach your quota? Like if your pipeline is anorexic, then that's a big problem. Again, number of discovery calls, number of meetings. I don't track, again, like I treat professional sales reps as such. So I don't track calls or emails or number of LinkedIn touches. To me, like, those are all activities that have to happen in order for you to get to an appointment, in order for you to get something in the pipeline, in order for you to close it. And so I say, like, I don't care if you work harder or you work smarter. So if you can do it in 20 phone calls or you need 200, it doesn't matter to me. Right? Some people take a more customized or personal approach. Some people are better at the written word than others. But at the end of the day, like the most lovely thing I think about the sport of sales is that it is an objective, right? Either we're going to hit quota or we're not going to hit quota. And so, I think, those they're very strict measurements, but I think, the companies that I have seen struggle, particularly doing remote and pandemic, are people who started to micromanage. Right? People who all of a sudden, like, I can't trust them. They're at home. I can't see them. So I need to know exactly how many calls you made every day and exactly how many emails you sent out. Hey, listen, again, this is a results-oriented sport. And so just hold people accountable to the end result and let them, again, like help them figure out the best way to get there. But, tracking people's, I said to founders right away, when this happened, like, hey, listen, you need to have a meeting with every one of your sales reps and figure out what their new work schedule is going to be, right? Do they have kids at home? Do they have aging parents that they're now more responsible for than they were before? So I said, from an expectation standpoint, it's everything from what can I count on you for the new work schedule to be, to, are we still cool with the quota that we gave you at the beginning of 2020 when we didn't know this was going to happen? So, but I would encourage, as everybody knows, I'm the accountability maven. So I would encourage everybody. The fact of the matter is there's two key pieces to accountability, and Kim knows, as much about this or more than I do, but you have to set expectations. You can't hold people accountable to expectations that have not been clearly outlined. And if the expectations have changed as a result of remote work or, dealing differently with customers, then you have an obligation to outline the new expectations. But people still expect to be held accountable. You still have to hold people accountable. I think we missed that piece, some of us, during the pandemic, when we were trying to insert empathy, but we dropped accountability in exchange for empathy. They're different, and they can still be both put in play.
Yeah, and I would add that, a good salesperson measures themselves, especially when it comes to leading indicators. I don't need to know how many calls you made, but you should. You should know exactly how many touch points it took to get that person to answer, when they answered, etc. I'm going to measure the lagging indicators. I'm going to set realistic goals, realistic stretches, and I'm going to make sure those are achieved. And if you need support on the leading, I'll work with you, but I don't need to count your calls. You do.
You need to know your personal, I call it your personal sales math. You need to understand your personal sales math, because that helps determine, are you working harder or working smarter?
And by the way, that's your A players. Whether it's a leader or an individual contributor, the people who are really successful are people who can learn. And that means I commit an action, there's a response, a result, I learn from it, I do differently, right? And that your A players and your B plus players do that. They're going to tell you, I had to make, this many calls to get to this step, to get to that step, and they're learning, they're improving, right? I think the other thing during COVID, and still, because we're not out of it yet, is that as a leader, manager, you have to get down in the trenches and you got to be side by side saying, we're going to figure this out together. We're going to figure out the world of COVID together. Now, again, once you're figuring it out or you're trying, right? Yeah, you do hold them accountable, but it's not, you can't just sit there as a leader or manager and say, you go figure it out. No, you got to be in the trenches figuring out with them. And, Kristie had a great example, and Doug too, of where you're having multi-people discovery calls. Well, there's a lot that you can learn from that. What was the best way to set it up? How did we draw from each individual? How were we listening? Were we paraphrasing? Were we really getting to the heart of each person's issue that would help us advance the sale? There's an art and a science to that. But if your discovery's usually been one-on-one and now you've got this great opportunity, there are pros and cons, and you got to mitigate the risk, so that involves planning. But there's a lot that could be learned from that. And then you have to say, okay, well, once we're back face to face, how can we take that and maybe really accelerate our sales? So I thought that was a great example you guys gave.
We do have another question over here. What defines a hot market or very hot market when it comes to hiring sales candidates? How does that actually compare to a slower market? Sometimes it looks exactly the same to companies when we are trying to hire the right person.
I mean, I can speak to this one. A hot market to me is when your A players are gone and you're trying to find good quality people to make a change, and then or settling for B plus players. It's all supply and demand, like any industry, like the housing market, like everything else. But when I go and try to find the Superman ideal candidate profile that my clients are looking for, it doesn't always exist. So we have to adjust the compensation. We have to adjust the flexibility. I'm always like, okay, great. This is what you want. What are you willing to adjust, and what things are must have and what you're just preferred? Because that person that you want is not going to be in that rate range. It's not going to be sitting in St. Louis. They might be in Colorado. They might be in Philadelphia. What are you willing to negotiate on? So I think it's also back again to the employer being flexible with what they want to find and adjusting their expectations. Does anybody else want to add to that?
I won't speak to hot markets. I'm going to leave that to Jamie, but I will say that the reality is I always looked at sales hiring as the only position that you really look at as like a partnership. You have to be able to sit down. You can't just say, this is what I'm going to pay a salesperson, and this is the model. Every salesperson is different. What they can deliver to you is different. How they can optimize your pipeline and bring you opportunities is different. So when you sit down at the table with a real sales candidate, I'm not talking, not that lower level isn't real, but somebody that's really going to be bringing in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of business, you have to walk into that like a negotiation between two partners, not just a new hire. I mean, that's somebody that's going to carry your business.
Okay, let's go to the next question here. As a follow-up to Kristie's statement, what is specifically going on in states like Colorado that make it so companies don't want to shop for candidates there?
Basically it goes, it's all around equality, right? Gender equality, age, so again, they're addressing some of the issues that have been out there. And again, one of the major ones is this item around asking about compensation, right? And so you are, and again, lots of states, this isn't just Colorado, but Colorado has sort of taken it to the next level, but lots of states over the last few years, in an effort to ensure that there's equal pay between minorities and white people, and women and men, and age issues, right? And so a lot of states have adopted you cannot ask about current compensation situations in order to help alleviate the unfairness in the market between certain segments of inequality. And so Colorado has taken that a few steps further. So they've given the employees a lot of latitude around making accusations, if you will, around the fact that I'm not being paid fairly, or that wasn't a legal interview question. I would encourage everyone to brush up, not just on, here's the problem, like it used to be we were just hiring in our own state, right? And I could figure out if I was hiring in a specific state, I could easily figure out whether or not I was going to be able to ask a question about compensation or not, right? That made it really easy. Well, now it got really confusing because now my client is in Denver, but the candidate is in Maine. And, which laws am I going to be held accountable to? So, when in doubt, stay the course of least resistance there. But again, like Kim said, like they're trying to do the right thing. They want fairness amongst hiring, right? That's the whole goal of what these states are trying to do, is to ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to be hired and to be paid fairly. But what they've done is scared off some employers.
So one of the things that the state has done that I think really ticked off employers is they're requiring that salary range be listed for any job. And that for many employers is considered kind of part of my competitive positioning. Maybe I don't want my competitors to know what I'm paying for a sales rep or a top engineer, right? The other thing is that like state of Illinois, whether you're located there or not, there are over and above requirements for annual sexual harassment training, and these things continue to kind of escalate state by state. But the ones that I've seen employers kind of really push back on is when you tell me I have to list the salary range, when I have to list other things that I consider really, my business and not the public's. And I don't disagree with an employer feeling that,
And as a result, we're putting really big ranges.
Yeah. I was going to say, what's the specification there? Can you just say 0 to 1 million?
You could. Yeah, we're just putting really big ranges on those, on those jobs.
So if anybody knows me, sometimes one of the things I like to do is tip a sacred cow, or, kind of not just talk about the things that we should be doing, but let's talk about the things maybe we shouldn't be doing. So for the panel, as you've been working with hiring managers or HR, what are the things that these groups tend to believe they're really good at doing when it comes to hiring salespeople that maybe in your experience you find out is not necessarily a strength, and maybe you've even had to school them a little bit?
Well, I could obviously speak to that one, but a lot of people still hire based on their gut, which is a huge mistake. Never hire based on your gut. People hire who they like or who they think is just like them. Sometimes the person that is opposite of you is going to be better than you. So maybe don't hire yourself, hire someone that's different. Yeah, just those are the things. And not validating the numbers. That's a big thing that we do, is always validate their performance. If someone can't speak to their numbers, can't speak to their goals, they're not an A player. They're making it up. And you can back down into 3 questions and figure out if someone's full of it or not. So validate and use assessments. I honestly don't love assessments because a lot of times there's not a good one for sales. But if you can find a good one for sales, use it. Don't use your accounting and finance or IT assessment for your sales team. Big mistake. But those are my 3 for now.
Well, I always say gut is a guide, but use the data to validate it. If somebody gives you an icky feeling, figure out why. Don't just say, I don't want to hire them. But the reality is that you shouldn't have a team of robots that are just doing exactly what you did. A good sales manager is finding a team that complements one another. But I always found with hiring, it's not the answers they give, it's the questions they ask, especially with salespeople. If I get a salesperson in an interview and they don't ask me a single thing about the organization or the company or the product or the struggles we're having or what markets we're in, then they're not a good seller. And so that's the first thing I always look for, is what kind of questions are they asking?
I was shocked recently when I went through a VP of sales candidate search for a client that only one of the 3 final candidates asked to see a demo of the product. I was shocked. And I haven't had a sales rep in years ask to see a demo of the product before agreeing to come on and sell it. I think that's super interesting. But I was shocked. These were high level $400,000 total compensation VPs, and only one asked to see the product. It was weird.
I wanted to kind of elaborate on something that Jamie said regarding assessments. It's really, really important that when you use this assessment for selection, you ensure that it does not create disparate impact. Your assessment provider can give you that kind of assurance. This has to do with EEOC, and this just basically says that it's not going to discriminate and cause protected class to in some way, shape, or form score less than others. And when we talk about in this world of pre-hire selection and using an instrument, there are assessments and there are tests. Some roles require literally a test. Let's say it's mathematics, it could be some sort of another technical test where we literally need to see that they can pass it. A lot of times though, we're looking at an assessment and we're looking, for instance, I have one that I do for sales hiring, and we look at personality factors that we know are aligned in a certain range with people who are really successful in sales. We also look at how they fit within 4 cultures, whether it's a power culture, it's a commerce culture, it's an affiliation culture, or a kind of a tradition culture, right? And so when we go to hire somebody, if they score really higher in commerce, but this is a startup who can't offer them much in the way of money, I'm kind of selling it the future, maybe some, quote unquote, quasi stock options. That's important. If somebody is high on power, but yet I need them they're selling in a highly, highly regulated industry, right? So if I had somebody who is off the charts on power and very low in security, and they're selling a pharmaceutical product, that makes me really nervous about off-label and kind of activity that's going to get the company in some hot water. So, we look at assessments when I work with clients of it adding about 33% of the information. Look at their background, their experience. Can they explain the numbers? How they show up in an interview? And by all means, have them, one of the things that we've done in the past is, especially if we're hiring medical device rep, comes from medical device, you have an overall understanding, or tech to tech, right? They understand enough. See how well they can acclimate, excuse me, to your product, and to be able to sell something back to you. Again, be very realistic about what you can expect somebody, at the end of maybe a 3-week interview process, if they progressed, how well are they uptaking the information? And that can be a real telling sign, just how quickly you could get them to onboard and how well they might even do in training.
Kim, we do have some more questions over here in the chat. So the issue with putting big ranges for Colorado is that the expectation is set for a lot of people's time to be wasted. If there is a range, I typically think that the middle is a good target. So that's maybe more of a statement. Do you have any comments on that, or?
It looks like she has a follow-up under that. It says, I should add that I don't live in Colorado, but I do use that data to see if I should apply. Are you saying not to use the salary data as a target?
Ah, gotcha. Okay. There was a couple questions in between there.
Again, like if you post a job in Colorado, then you have to give a range. And really, like to Doug's point, if you're talking about a true 6-figure whale hunter, that range can be pretty big. And the thing that I guess that frustrates me a little bit about the Colorado situation is, for sales reps in particular, it shouldn't be about the base, it should be about the variable compensation, right? And so, like, yes, I'm going to pay you a base salary because there are certain expectations that the job has, CRM hygiene, doing certain tasks, being a good team player with other departments. But the end of the day, a true hunter, a true, whale hunter wants as much upside as humanly possible. And Colorado didn't talk about that, right? This is all about base salary. Well, a good sales rep, it isn't about base salary. It's about the upside from a commission standpoint. So, I think it's really hard because, if I got a sales rep who's all panties in a bunch over the base salary, then I already know I don't have what I'm looking for, right? So, it's an interesting, this goes back to like hiring salespeople is a very unique situation. I call them professional interviewees. So somebody asked earlier about, kind of how do we discern certain people? The more, like, again, to Jamie's point, I have a very structured process. I run it the same way, the same time with whatever client, whatever job, so that I know I'm working the process. But the more times you touch them, the more likely it is that you'll find out things you didn't find out the first time. And so, like I like to have at least 3 conversations and involve other people in the organization to check culture fit, those type of things. But people will get more comfortable over time, right? And then all of a sudden things that might not have been privy in the first conversation and the first formal interview will come out eventually. But I think, really when you're hiring sales reps, if it's about the base salary, then you got the wrong person.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got another comment. I don't know if I think you guys can see this, Kathleen. We use Caliper and provide them the job description and skills needed. It supplements, but not the deal breaker. Each role has a separate assessment, so it's super helpful. Okay, then another question. What are some non-traditional resources or sources that companies can use to recruit the A+ sales talent?
I think it starts with the job description, right? So I write a job description as a go or no go, right? So if this is you, but in some cases I say if this is like, if you need again, I'm hiring for mostly startups. If you need a handbook and a dress code, and you need to know how many, sick days you can have versus, vacation days or whatever, this is probably not a good fit for you, right? And so if you need standard operating procedures, and the people on the panel know that I like to use this phrase, you have to be more willow than oak. So if you're oak, this isn't a good place for you. You got to be willow, because we're changing messaging all the time. We're working on new product features all the time. So, we're all of a sudden, like what you demoed yesterday, now we have 3 new features that the dev team just released today that you got to learn before the next demo. So I try to write the job description in a way that helps people self-select out if that's not them. Right. And then I think the questions that you ask along the way, Jamie, you can jump in here for sure, because, I'm always like, initially, I always say, I'm looking to make sure that you are a qualified candidate for the job. Then I flip the script and put the big red bow on, right? Then I go into sales mode. But initially I got to make sure that this is the right fit for the candidate, and the candidate should be just as concerned, right? So I think a lot of times interviews are one-way streets and not 2 ways. And I try to make it 2 ways. So, and I say to them, like, I need you to be an educated consumer, because over the next 5 or 6 hours, you will know way before me if this is a good idea or not.
We used to have a policy, or we had a policy at the last company I was with, where the candidates would have an interview with me first. They had 20 minutes to ask me anything they wanted to ask me, and I couldn't ask any questions. And that was partially because the team wanted them to get to know who they were going to be reporting to, so they didn't get through the whole process and be like, I got to work with him, screw this. So we got ahead of that, but it also gave me insight into what kind of things they were looking for. And interestingly enough, the best candidates always asked about the product, asked about the company. But I had people get on those calls and be like, so beach or mountains? And I'm like, really? You got 20 minutes with me? You want to know if I'm going to beaches or mountains? Or are we going to do, the Stones versus the Beatles? So you really want to kind of use those opportunities to let them ask questions, but you get to see what kind of people they are with the questions they ask. Again, I'm like a broken record, but wanted to follow that up.
Yeah, my viewpoint is a little different, because when I'm trying to pull A players out of a job that they're currently in, because they're not sitting there applying to post or, reaching out to me. They're moving for compensation. I hate to say that, but it's the truth. Right now, people are buying good people, just like they're paying a premium for everything else. And it sucks, because honestly, some of my clients are buying talent that they shouldn't. So I actually predict that there's going to be flip in another 6 months to a year, where all these overpaid people are going to get let go, and they're going to bring in people that are at the right price range, because companies are desperate. If you have a good price point, the other thing is just, again, the company has to sell themselves, be flexible. They have to have the cultural piece that, Doug, you can talk to. People want the total package. They want to be paid well, and they want a good culture. And if you don't have these pieces, you don't have a good Glassdoor review, you think people aren't looking at your social media, aren't looking at your company profile, you're mistaken. They're looking at it, and they want to know, Am I going to go work for the company that everybody wants to work for? Or am I going to go work for the company that no one's ever heard of, that has no marketing plan, no program, and a poor Glassdoor review? So it's just being that company that people want to go to and then paying them the right amount. I don't know. I hate to say that.
I think everybody wants to be compensated, but they don't want to be miserable either. And so it's this balance between what's a fair rate and what is going to give a seller the opportunity to perform and earn. And a culture that allows enough competitive sales kind of vibe, but still gives people a feeling of home and a feeling of belonging is huge. And nowadays, people want to believe in the product they sell more than ever. I mean, 20 years ago, nobody gave it about what they were selling. They're just selling. Now it's like everybody wants to believe. They want to know their products are sustainable. They want to know their company does good for the community and gives back. They want to talk about the organization they work for in a way of pride. And if you can't give them that narrative, there isn't a single amount of money you can pay them that's going to keep them. You might get them to leave their job, but you're not going to be able to get them to stay with cash.
And I would also add to employers just to watch the market and stay abreast of who's acquiring who. There's a lot of movement when a company gets acquired or when there's a shift in management or a shift in leadership. So I've gotten a lot of good people to make changes because their company's gone through an acquisition this year. So you'll still find some good people out there that have had a change outside of their control. And I've hit up companies that I've heard gone through an acquisition and just coached entire sales teams before.
I've always said there's no such thing as an unemployed salesperson. It's just, if you're a seller, you've got a job, you're selling something. And so it really comes down to catching people at the right point of their life when they're just changing or shifting or exhausted or not feeling where their company is right now. And that's about presence too. It is a lot of marketing. It's making sure that your brand, your culture, and your people are being promoted. People want to go places where they can feel like they're a part of the team. If you're a company that doesn't show off your employees, it's going to be very hard to find good candidates.
I think a couple things that, we're so focused on hiring the right salesperson, and we're really focused a lot here on this panel with, the A players and the B plus players and, maybe catching the whales. Employees, your salespeople, they may want to progress their career. They may want to move into management. They may be interested in career pathing. And it may be a situation where they need a certain lifestyle. So back in the day, I worked for a medical device company, surgery. You could be in surgery at 6 a.m. You could still be there at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. We lost a lot of reps to selling breast implants in the doctor's office. Why? Because it's a 9 to 4 job and you can go to the practice with your kids and you can do this stuff. So if you've got a sales role that is really conducive for family life, meaning that person can make some money, they'll do what you need them to do, and it works for family life, my God, sell that. Especially in this day and age with COVID where, maybe some kids at home, a lot of families now decided to homeschool, right? So if your sales role is really set up for a certain, family life, push that. If it's not, if you need basically somebody you want on the road, then tell it like it is. If there's career pathing, sell that. Because, at different points in our life, we have different needs, right? And so think about if, again, your sales role can fit that and you can market to that, by all means, do it.
Okay, Monica's got more questions here. We've got a lot here. Can you guys read all these?
Just saw that, and I would say to Monica that she definitely is a desirable candidate. She's 100% right, a lot of people that have waited to go back into the market. Sometimes, if this is an opinion only, it's good to have a recruiter help you because recruiters can speak on your behalf and get you through the pile of resumes. It is difficult when you have a gap and you don't have anyone going to bat for you. So in that instance, it's important to network. It's important if you are an A player to have your results and have, some people still do have an online version of a brag book or have something that speaks to you being able to ramp up and do it again. So I'd say you're going to be fine. There's definitely a lot of jobs out there. And it's not unusual. You're right.
I would say to Monica, I don't think you're at risk if you address it on your resume. Right. So you can't leave an unexplained 12-month gap on your resume. Right. Because again, like I mean, I'm getting 150 to 175 resumes in the first 4 to 5 days of posting any sales job. So the first thing I got to do is quickly go through resumes and decide who I want to do a phone screen with. So no, there are lots of people who've made the decision that you made, but you've got to address it. You can't just leave a gap on your resume because that's, that's going to be like, so I'm going through all those resumes. I've got other choices.
Oh, we should add
I
like
was just going to add that COVID is the great equalizer too. I don't think anybody is looking at resumes right now and during the pandemic and going, what? They didn't work. So, you get a pass. I just, but like Kristie said, address it, be transparent, and go out and bring value.
So just for everyone else in the audience listening, Monica was concerned if she was more at risk because she got laid off and she's been out of work for the last year during COVID. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Like, and again, like I'm seeing a lot of people's resumes where they are at the job for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, right? Because they started in February of 2020 and by August of 2020 they were gone. I mean, I know what that is, right? Anything that happened between, April and December 2020, I know what that is. But a lot of people are literally just putting that on their resumes, and I'm calling it COVIDing it out, getting COVID out. So, but it's sometimes, but they're saying like, like let go due to COVID, and there's no shame in that, right? So feel free to address that in writing because there isn't any shame in that. I can make certain assumptions, but if you don't address it at all, and the longer you're out, the longer you wonder if again, that's like if you're choosing to be out or you just haven't found the right fit too. So just address it. Everybody, again, like we're all real sympathetic right now.
Okay, it looks like we've got another one here. What other recruiting sites do you recommend in addition to LinkedIn, Glassdoor, and Indeed? Handshake seems to be working well too. I thought that was just for college recruiting. I'm not sure. Is Handshake for everybody?
I don't use Handshake, so it must be for college.
I think it's for college. What else do you guys recommend besides Indeed, Glassdoor, LinkedIn?
It depends on the role, but like the ladders, if it's a senior position, I personally think we can use LinkedIn as in the networking groups that are on there based on your specialty. Join groups that are in line with what you do. Reach out to employers on there more proactively. You hit on all the major ones. Find a recruiter in your area of specialty in your market or not in your market to get help and opinions on too.
I think Slack is an underutilized resource. I just pulled up my Slack channel, but I belong to Women in Revenue. I belong to Rev Genius. I belong to a few other groups in there that all have job boards and support each other. So again, there are Slack groups for everything out there, and so join some of these revenue or sales Slack groups.
Okay, it looks like we've got about 5 minutes. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to touch on? I don't see any more questions in here. Or you could.
That was a lot. I even learned.
I know, it was great. You guys were just, full of information.
I think one of the things that we covered off on the last panel when we did this back in December of 2020, and that we all were really, really aligned with, is that you should have a formal interview process. Not only does that help you with consistency and standardization that you actually get the best candidate, it helps you legally, right? We've touched upon that a little bit, but whether you have 25 sales managers across the country, etc., you want to have the same standard process. I know our group here would advocate that you use a recruiter to get the best talent to help you weed, folks out. I'm going to advocate that you use some sort of an assessment. It needs to make sense for your role. And we're going to advocate that you, of course, train and onboard. We haven't really talked about onboarding so much or training, but that is really, really critical. And I would advocate it in some way, shape, or form. You have them demonstrate to you through role play with your product. A sales rep who comes to you from another product, probably, especially if they're an A player, top of their game, right? But what you want to really see is how well can they really demonstrate that they're picking up your product and that they can adapt, right? Because again, as Kristie said, professional interviewers, and let's face it, salespeople can be chameleons. So standardize, use objective tools like an assessment, put them to the test, have them demonstrate and role play, etc., what their skills are. Ask a lot of behavioral interviewing questions. You know, how do you, your biggest sale, how did you get there? You know, if you were going to improve one thing about your selling skills, what would it be? You know, what do you still have to learn to improve in? You know, what are you going to need from me as your manager? You know, if somebody wants you, you know, lockstep with them and kind of needs your approval and your direction, and you just need somebody to have autonomy and go, you need to know that. So that's one of the things I think that we really talked about on the last panel that seemed to really resonate with folks. So I just wanted to share that.
I want to add to ask personal questions. I love, there's a question that, I mean, don't do anything that would be inappropriate or
be very careful.
Yeah, no gender-based stuff here. I'm just saying that, like, to ask, like, what are you reading right now? Tell me what your, you know, goals are, what makes you happy. Because the thing is that you hire people and then you find out there's a whole different person sitting at the desk, or vice versa. They find out it's a whole different company. And the number one thing I would say is make sure you have a sales process and system in place. Don't hire salespeople and then expect them to build their own machine. Give them the tools they need so that they're not all doing their own stuff.
Absolutely. And then from the candidate side, if people are looking for jobs, I would make sure you have a good online brand, a professional LinkedIn photo, that your LinkedIn matches your resume, that your Facebook or personal things are locked down and set as private. I just had somebody this week lose a job over political Facebook posts that were not private. Their name is very unusual, very easy to find, and very political comments that cost them a job. So just be smart about your online brand as well.
I'll throw in there that I had a candidate resume come through where their profile picture was them at the gun range. I thought that was an interesting choice.
Smart when you're looking for a job.
Yeah, and my client was not selling weapons.
Yeah. I would say one thing that a little bit aligned with what we're talking about here is that if you're following what we're recommending, you've got a good hiring process, you're using a recruiter, you're using assessments, and you have really high turnover, it's time to look inward and it's time to have an honest conversation. Does your product not have a good name in the market? Do you really not have a strong value proposition? Is it the manager? Because if you're doing what we're recommending, these are truly best practices. And if you have a lot of turnover, something's missing. And we're going to say it's really time to look inward and have an honest conversation about what's going on.
I lost my mute button for a second. I had another screen over there. So let's see, we've got, okay. So I think we probably we have 1 minute. If you have, well, we've got one more comment. If you've got 25 years of experience, what should you focus on when you're asked about your experience?
I would focus on what's relevant to the hirer.
Okay.
Focus on what is most important to them, not what you feel you need to show. If they're in a certain industry, if they're selling a certain product, if they're looking for certain attributes or traits in a hiree, those are the things you should emphasize in your experience.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Doug. Okay, let's wrap up here because we're kind of right at time. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to the panelists. You guys did a great job and I learned a ton as well. And thank you for our audience for joining us today. We truly hope you found value on our panel. We look forward to your feedback. Thank you to all the sponsors, and please feel free to reach out to any of our panelists on LinkedIn. You can find us on LinkedIn. We're happy to connect, and on behalf of everyone at the Earning Curve, we will see you soon. I cannot confirm the next Earning Curve because we've got some changes coming, but they're exciting changes. So we will have some new events coming soon. Watch social media and your email for details about our next events and announcements. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.